I never thought of myself as a suspicious man. For 10 years, Rachel and I had what most would call a solid marriage. We had a nice home, good careers, and a social life that kept us busy but not overwhelmed. If someone had asked me 6 months ago if I trusted my wife, I would have laughed and said, with my life. But trust is a fragile thing, strong until the moment it isn't. Started small, little things, the kind of things you tell yourself don't matter. Rachel began coming home later than usual. Not ridiculously late, just an hour or two past her usual time, always with a reasonable excuse, work deadlines, last-minute drinks with colleagues, traffic. Nothing worth fighting over. Then there were the changes in her habits. She started dressing differently, wearing perfume she hadn't used in years, spending more time on her phone but tilting the screen away when I walked into the room. Again, I dismissed it. We'd been married for a decade, and I figured people change. Maybe she was just trying to feel more confident. Maybe I was overthinking things. But then came the night that changed everything. It was a Thursday. Rachel had told me she'd be working late. Nothing unusual. I had planned to grab a beer and catch up on some work emails, but halfway through my second drink, something gnawed at me. A small, unwelcome whisper in my mind that wouldn't go away. I decided to surprise her. I drove to her office, thinking I'd bring her coffee, a small gesture to brighten her night. But when I arrived, the building was nearly empty. The parking lot, too. I checked the time. 9:45 p.m. If she was working late, where was her car? I sat there for a few minutes, debating whether I should call her. Maybe she had moved to a different location, a meeting offsite. But that whisper in my mind had turned into a scream. Instead of calling her, I texted, "Still at work." A minute later, the response came, "Yeah, swamped. Heading home soon." I stared at the message. Cold. Calculated. A lie. And for the first time in 10 years, I felt something I never thought I'd feel toward my wife. Doubt. I sat in my car outside Rachel's office, gripping the steering wheel so hard my knuckles turned white. The building was dark. The parking lot was nearly empty. Yet, she had just texted me that she was still swamped with work. A normal husband, one who still lived in blissful ignorance, might have called and asked where she was. Might have believed some excuse about moving to a different location, a last-minute change of plans. But I wasn't that man anymore. The moment she lied so smoothly, without hesitation, something inside me shifted. I needed proof. Instead of driving home, I pulled out of the lot and parked a few blocks away, opening the GPS tracker I had installed on Rachel's phone months ago. Not because I didn't trust her. I had done it for safety, for peace of mind. Irony at its finest. Her location wasn't anywhere near her office. She was across town at a hotel. I stared at the screen, heart pounding so loud I could hear it in my ears. Maybe there was an explanation. A work event? A friend in town? But then why lie? I didn't even realize I had made the decision to go there until I found myself driving. My hands steady, my mind cold and sharp. 20 minutes later, I pulled into the parking lot of a boutique hotel. One of those places with dim lighting and a sleek, modern design meant for discretion. My stomach churned as I scanned the cars. And then I saw it. Rachel's car, parked near the side entrance. I sat there, staring at it, feeling like the world had tilted under me. I could still turn around, drive home, pretend I never saw this. But I wasn't that kind of man. I needed to know. I stepped out of my car, my mind already forming a plan. This wasn't going to be a dramatic confrontation. No yelling in the lobby, no emotional breakdown. If Rachel was betraying me, I wanted her to dig her own grave first. I walked toward the hotel, pulling up the fake reservation I had just made on my phone. If she was here, I would find out exactly why. And I would make her regret every second of it. The hotel lobby smelled of polished wood and expensive cologne. Soft jazz played through hidden speakers, and the receptionist barely glanced up as I walked past, my fake reservation ready in case anyone asked questions. I wasn't shaking. I wasn't panicking. In fact, I felt disturbingly calm, like I had already accepted what I was about to find. Rachel's car was outside. Her phone's GPS placed her here. And yet, A small part of me, some foolish, dying ember of hope, whispered that maybe there was another explanation. That maybe I would wake up from this nightmare and realize I had let paranoia get the best of me. But that part of me was about to die. I stepped into the elevator and checked the tracker again. Room 214, second floor. I moved through the hallway like a ghost, my ears tuned to every sound. Laughter behind one door, muffled voices behind another. Then, as I approached room 214, I heard it, her voice. Rachel. She was laughing. A soft, intimate sound. A sound I hadn't heard in months. I froze, my fingers hovering over the door handle. I wanted to kick it down, to tear through whatever illusion she had wrapped herself in. But no, that wasn't the way. I wanted proof. I wanted the kind of evidence that would leave her no room to spin another lie. I pulled my phone from my pocket and hit record. Then carefully I knocked. Silence. A pause. Then hurried footsteps. A moment later, the door cracked open just enough for Rachel's face to appear. Her eyes widened in pure, unfiltered shock. And for the first time in our marriage, I saw something I had never seen before. Fear. Ethan. Her voice wavered. What are you doing here? I smiled. A slow, measured smile. Funny? I said, slipping my foot in the doorway before she could close it. I was about to ask you the same thing. Rachel's breath hitched as she realized I wasn't going anywhere. She gripped the edge of the door, her knuckles turning white. Her face, usually so composed, so confident, was a mess of emotions. Shock, panic, a flicker of calculation. Ethan, she said, voice unnaturally high. This isn't what it looks like. I almost laughed. The cliché of it all. The sheer audacity. I leaned against the doorframe, tilting my head slightly. Really? Because it looks like my wife, who said she was working late, is standing in the doorway of a hotel room, looking like she just saw a ghost. Rachel swallowed hard, her lips parting, but no words came out. Behind her, I caught the glimpse of a dimly lit room. Unmade sheets, a half-empty glass of wine on the nightstand. The air smelled of expensive cologne. Not mine. My chest tightened, but I forced myself to stay calm. Move, I said quietly. She stiffened. Ethan, I can explain. I bet you can, I murmured. Now move. She hesitated for a fraction of a second too long, and that hesitation told me everything. I didn't wait. I pressed forward, forcing the door open just enough to step inside. Rachel stumbled back, panic flashing across her face. And then I saw him, a man, sitting on the edge of the bed, buttoning up his shirt. He was older, maybe early 50s, with salt and pepper hair and the kind of smug expression that made my fists itch. He looked up at me without an ounce of shame, as if this was just another Thursday for him. Rachel spun around, putting herself between us. Ethan, please. I ignored her. My eyes locked on him. You, I said coldly. You're the one she's been sneaking off to see? He smirked. Actually smirked. I take it you're the husband. I stepped closer, closing the distance between us. The room suddenly felt suffocating, thick with the scent of betrayal. You don't seem too concerned about being caught in another man's bed. He chuckled, as he finished buttoning his shirt. Rachel never mentioned you were the jealous type. Rachel grabbed my arm. Ethan, please, let's talk outside. I yanked my arm free. Talk? Now you want to talk. I turned to her, my voice dangerously quiet. Where was all this honesty when you were sneaking off to meet him? Rachel paled. It's not what you think. I stared at her for a long moment. Then I pulled out my phone, tapped the screen, and played back the last 30 seconds of audio. Her voice, her laughter, her lie. Rachel's mouth snapped shut. I slipped the phone back into my pocket and took a slow step toward the man. He didn't move, didn't flinch, just sat there, adjusting his expensive watch, completely unfazed. You should leave, he said smoothly. This is between me and Rachel. I smiled, a sharp, cold smile. Oh, you have no idea who you just pissed off. The man didn't move. He just sat there, smoothing out his sleeves like this was some casual business meeting and not the moment his life was about to take a very, very bad turn. Rachel was trembling now, her eyes darting between me and him like she wasn't sure which one of us was the bigger threat. "Ethan, please," she whispered. "Let's talk about this. Just you and me." I ignored her. My focus was on him. "You got a name?" I asked, my voice level. He smirked, like he found the whole situation amusing. "Richard. Richard." Even his name sounded smug. "Richard?" I repeated slowly, rolling the name over my tongue. "And tell me, Richard, how long have you been screwing my wife?" Rachel sucked in a sharp breath. "Ethan, stop." "But Richard," he just chuckled. "Does it matter?" he asked. Oh, that was a mistake. I moved so fast that neither of them saw it coming. 1 second I was standing near the door, the next, I had a fistful of his expensive dress shirt, yanking him off the bed. His smirk vanished as he stumbled forward, barely catching himself against the nightstand. Rachel screamed, "Ethan, stop!" But I wasn't done. I shoved him hard, sending him sprawling back onto the bed. He wasn't laughing now. "You think this is funny?" I growled, looming over him. "You think you can screw another man's wife and just walk away?" Richard's hands went up, mock surrender. "Look, man, I didn't let him finish." I grabbed the wine glass from the nightstand and smashed it against the wall, shards raining onto the carpet. The sound echoed in the room, and finally I saw it, fear. Rachel was crying now, her hands clutched to her mouth. "Please, Ethan, please, don't do this." I turned to her, eyes burning. "Don't do what, Rachel?" I gestured to the broken glass, to the ruined moment they thought they could share in secret. "Don't react? Don't be mad? Should I just shake his hand and thank him for keeping you entertained?" She sobbed harder, but I had no sympathy left. Richard cleared his throat, shifting slightly on the bed. "Look, man, I grabbed the lamp off the nightstand and hurled it across the room. It shattered against the dresser, the crash making him flinch. "Shut up." My voice was deadly calm. For the first time, Richard looked truly uneasy. "Good." I took a slow breath, rolling my shoulders, letting the rage settle into something colder, more controlled. I turned to Rachel, who was shaking so hard she could barely stand. "Here's what's going to happen," I said quietly. "You're going to go home. You're going to pack a bag. And you're going to get the hell out of my house." Her lip trembled. "Ethan." "No," I cut her off with a sharp wave of my hand. "You don't speak. Not after this." She let out a choked sob, but I wasn't finished. I turned back to Richard, stepping closer, lowering my voice so only he could hear. "As for you," I smiled, but there was nothing friendly about it. "I'm going to ruin you." Richard blinked. "What?" "You heard me," I said softly. "You think this ends here? You think I'm just going to walk away and let you go back to your perfect little life?" His throat bobbed. I leaned in, my voice a whisper. "I'm going to find out everything about you. Your job, your family, your secrets. And then I'm going to make sure this mistake costs you everything." A flicker of real panic crossed his face. And that's when I knew this wasn't over. Not even close. Richard sat frozen on the bed, his smug confidence finally cracking. He wasn't used to losing control, but that's exactly what was happening now. Rachel, still crying, reached out toward me, but I took a step back. I didn't want her touch. I didn't want her words. I wanted her gone. "Go home," I repeated, voice cold. "Pack your things. You have an hour." "Ethan, please," she whispered. "We can talk." I laughed. Actually laughed. "Talk? About what, Rachel? How long you've been lying to my face? How long you've been sneaking around?" I turned my gaze to Richard. "Or should we talk about him?" Richard finally spoke, voice unsteady. "Look, man, I didn't mean for." I snapped toward him. "Shut your mouth before I break your teeth." He shut up. Rachel was sobbing openly now, shaking her head like she couldn't believe this was happening, like she wasn't the one who caused it. "I didn't want this," she choked out. "I never meant to hurt you." I clenched my jaw, exhaling slowly. I couldn't let her words get to me. Not now. You already did. The silence after those words was deafening. I turned away from both of them, heading for the door. 1 hour, Rachel, I reminded her. Don't be there when I get home. I yanked the door open and stepped into the hallway. But before I left, I paused, just long enough to glance over my shoulder. Enjoy your last night of peace, Richard. I smiled darkly. You won't have another. Then I walked out, already planning my next move. I drove home with my knuckles white against the steering wheel, my mind already working through the next steps. Rachel thought she had shattered me, that I'd crawl into bed and drown in misery. She had no idea who she had just betrayed. I wasn't going to cry. I wasn't going to beg. I was going to make her regret ever thinking she could do this to me. When I pulled into the driveway, the house was dark. Good. That meant she was either still at the hotel or had already started packing. Either way, she wouldn't see what I was about to do next. I walked inside, the air thick with memories that now felt rotten. I ignored them. I had work to do. First, I opened my laptop and went straight to the financials. Rachel had always been careless with money, assuming I wasn't paying attention. She was wrong. I transferred every single joint account into my personal one. The savings, the investments, even the emergency fund she thought we had. Gone. Next, I pulled up my home security app and changed all the codes. The front door, the garage, the cameras. Rachel wasn't stepping foot in this house again without my permission. Then, I moved to my phone, opening the folder labeled insurance, except it wasn't insurance at all. It was proof. Screenshots of texts I had pulled from her cloud account. Bank statements showing charges to that hotel on multiple nights. A full record of her betrayal. And then there was Richard. I had only just begun to ruin him. I opened a new search tab and typed in his full name, the one I had found on his wallet when I accidentally knocked it off the nightstand at the hotel. Richard Holloway, CFO of Sterling and Bright Investments. I smiled. Big job. Big reputation. A reputation that wouldn't survive what I had planned. I clicked on the company website, scrolling until I found the leadership page. There he was, grinning in a tailored suit, his bio filled with empty words about integrity and strong leadership. I almost laughed. A man like Richard had everything to lose, and I was going to take it all. But first, I wanted him to sweat. I picked up my phone and sent him a single text from an untraceable number. Enjoy your position while it lasts. You won't have it much longer.
No threats.
No details. Just enough to plant the first seed of fear. And when it bloomed, I'd be there to watch him fall. I didn't sleep that night. I didn't need to. The rush of adrenaline, the sheer clarity of my plan, kept me wired. While Rachel was probably sobbing into a pillow somewhere, and Richard was lying awake, staring at his phone, wondering who had texted him, I was working. By the time the sun rose, I had everything I needed to tear Richard's world apart. I started with an email to Sterling and Bright HR Department. Subject: Urgent concern, Richard Holloway's conduct. Hello. I'm reaching out as a concerned party regarding a serious conflict of interest involving Richard Holloway. There is strong evidence that he has been engaging in an inappropriate relationship with a married woman, one whose husband happens to have access to financial records that may raise ethical concerns about his spending. Please let me know how you would like to proceed. Sincerely, a concerned citizen. I attached a few carefully chosen screenshots, receipts from the hotel under his name, texts between him and Rachel that made it painfully clear what was going on. Nothing illegal, but enough to get the whispers started. I hit send, and just like that, the first domino fell. By the time I left for work, Rachel had finally texted me. Rachel, Ethan, please, we need to talk. Rachel, I don't want it to end like this. Rachel, just tell me where I can stay. I don't have anywhere to go. I stared at the messages, feeling nothing. I could have told her to check into a motel. I could have told her to stay with Richard, since she clearly thought he was worth destroying our marriage for. But I didn't. Instead, I sent her one sentence. Rachel, you lost the right to ask me for anything the second you opened that hotel door. Then I blocked her number. Let her sit with the consequences. Let her realize that the safety net she assumed would always be there was gone. I wasn't her husband anymore. I was her reckoning. The email I sent about Richard was only step one. Step two was personal. I called in sick to work. Not because I needed rest, but because I needed the whole day to burn everything down. Rachel had moved like a shadow through our marriage, slipping away piece by piece, thinking I wouldn't notice. But now it was my turn to disappear from her life, except I wouldn't slip away. I'd rip myself from it, leaving her nothing but the wreckage. I spent the morning at my lawyer's office. Divorce? I told him, placing a thick folder on the desk.
No negotiations.
No second chances. The lawyer, a sharp-eyed man who had clearly seen his share of betrayals, flipped through the evidence I had gathered. Texts, financial records, proof of her affair. He nodded, impressed. "This will make it easy," he said. "And considering your assets, she's about to lose everything." I smiled. That's the idea. By noon, my phone buzzed. An unknown number. I picked up. "Who the hell are you?" Richard's voice snapped through the line. He was angry. No, he was desperate. I chuckled. "Oh, Richard, you already know who I am. You think this little stunt is going to ruin me?" He sneered. "You think an email is enough to take me down?" I leaned back in my chair, completely at ease. "You're already panicking. That tells me all I need to know." Silence. A long silence. I continued, my voice low and calm. "I know more than you think. Your hotel receipts, your work credit card charges, even that little executive fund you've been dipping into. How do you think your board of directors will feel when they see where that money has been going?" His breathing turned sharp. "You son of a—" I hung up, because the best part? I wasn't bluffing. I had spent all night digging. And what I found? Richard had more to hide than just an affair. By the end of the day, he'd know exactly what it felt like to have his life torn apart. And Rachel? She was about to learn what it felt like to beg. I was finishing my coffee when Rachel finally showed up. I heard her before I saw her. The frantic pounding on the front door, the muffled sound of her crying. I took my time. Let her stand out there in the cold, desperate, humiliated. Let her feel a fraction of what she had done to me. When I finally opened the door, she looked nothing like the woman who had laughed in that hotel room. Her eyes were swollen, her hair a mess, her hands trembling as she clutched her phone. "Ethan, please," she choked out. "Please, just let me explain." I leaned against the doorframe, arms crossed. Calm, unshaken. "Explain what, Rachel?" Tears spilled down her cheeks. "I messed up. I know I did. I was stupid. I was selfish. But I love you." I actually laughed. "Love me?" I repeated. "You sure had a funny way of showing it." She stepped closer, trying to grab my hand, but I pulled back. "I wasn't thinking, Ethan," she whispered. "It didn't mean anything." Ah, there it was. The classic line. "It didn't mean anything?" I echoed. "So what was it? A hobby? A stress reliever? You were just bored." She let out a sob, shaking her head. "I don't know. I was lost. But I never stopped loving you." My stomach twisted, but I refused to let her see it. I refused to let her think there was a single part of me left that would give her another chance. "You made your choice," I said, my voice like steel. "And now you get to live with it." Her breath hitched. "Ethan, I don't have anywhere to go." I stared at her, letting the weight of those words settle between us. The woman who had once mocked my devotion, who had taken me for granted, was now standing here, shattered, with nothing. "Good. That's not my problem," I said simply. I stepped back, and before she could say another word, I shut the door in her face. Rachel pounded on the door again, desperate, broken. "Ethan, please, just talk to me." I stood there watching the door like it was some kind of pathetic performance. She wasn't crying because she lost me. She was crying because she lost her safety net. I took a deep breath, exhaled slowly, then walked away, leaving her outside like the stranger she had become. She kept knocking for another 5 minutes. Then silence. I checked the security camera feed. Rachel was still there, standing on the porch, staring at her phone. Probably calling someone to rescue her. Not my problem. I turned off the screen and went back to my coffee. Let her drown. My phone buzzed. Unknown number. I answered, already smiling. Richard. His voice was a mess of anger and panic. What the hell did you do? I leaned back in my chair. You'll have to be more specific. My company, my accounts. He was spiraling. They're auditing me. Someone sent them everything. I sipped my coffee. Ha! Imagine that. You think you can ruin me? He hissed. You don't know who you're messing with. I laughed softly.
No, Richard.
You don't. Silence. Tense. Cold. Then finally he hung up. I leaned forward, cracking my knuckles. Checkmate. Another knock. Softer this time. I checked the camera. Rachel. Still there. Pathetic. I opened the door just enough to see her tear-streaked face. Ethan, she whispered. I have nothing left. I raised an eyebrow. And, she swallowed hard. I know I don't deserve it, but, can we just talk? I stared at her for a long moment. Then, without a word, I shut the door. Again. Rachel didn't knock again. She just stood there, staring at the closed door. Waiting. Hoping. I let her. Then, after a few minutes, she finally turned and walked away. Gone. I watched through the camera as she got into her car. Probably the last thing she still had, and drove off. Nowhere to go. No one left to turn to. I exhaled slowly. It was over. Almost. The next morning, I got the email I was waiting for. Subject. Richard Holloway, termination notice. I smiled. Rachel had lost her home. Richard had lost his career. And I had lost nothing. I stepped outside, breathing in the crisp morning air. Free. Untouched. Unshaken. Rachel and Richard thought they could betray me and walk away unscathed. They were wrong.